Okay, so in this next video, we'll continue with where we left off in terms of the slope gradients, the remaining two gradients, and then we'll look at delineating the ridges and the valleys. You will notice that in the previous video I skipped a slope, a gradient category, and went to the third one instead of the second one. Uh, so this next slope is supposed to be, or this next gradient is supposed to be the 1 in 4 to 1 in 10, and not the 1 in 10 to 1 in 20. So the first is the steeper than 1 in 4. Then from there we move to the 1 in 4 to 1 in 10. Next, we'll look at the 1 in 10 to 1 in 20, and the remaining area will automatically fall under the flatter than 1 in 20. All right, so in terms of next horizontal distance, we will be looking at the 4-meter horizontal distance. So we'll follow the same steps as we did previously, just to offset that first contour. Just type offset, then insert a distance of 4,000, and just offset that upward by 4,000. Select that offset line and allocate it to the guides layer. Let me just activate the guides layer again. Okay. And then from there, remember the only two lines that we're looking at the moment is this first contour that we're working with and the contour line directly adjacent to it. So don't get confused. Always check in terms of the intersection with the guidelines, always look at the two lower contours that we're working with. Okay, so the first 4-meter intersection is at that point over there. So we want to just take a polyline from there, starting at the intersection, and then draw uh, draw that line at a perpendicular angle against that bottom contour. Then the next intersection, again we draw a line perpendicular to the bottom contour. To make sure that you are drawing directly at a perpendicular angle, you can just right click, hold down shift on your keyboard and right click on your mouse and just click on perpendicular, and what that does is it activates only the perpendicular object snap, and then you can just click on that. Just keep in mind that when you activate the object snap that way, it automatically terminates after you've completed your you can just delete your guideline. So just select the guideline and just delete it, and then create your boundaries. So at this point, we can just activate the next gradient category, so which will be the 1 in 10 to 1 in 20. You can just click on that, and then type in boundary, click new, and then select all the outlines within which you create your boundary. What you can do is you can select the overall outline as well, so we'll pick both boundaries at the same time. So we'll pick the third category as well as the fourth category, create the boundary for both at the same time, and then we'll just allocate that fourth boundary to the correct layer afterwards. So you just select all of those lines, click enter, hit OK, then we can just create those relevant boundaries. And then what we'll do is we'll select the fourth category, which is flatter than 1 in flatter than 1 in 20. Just allocate those boundaries to the correct layer, and you can just add the hatch. And then we can just switch to last gradient category layer, which is flatter than 1 to 20, or 1 in 20, and just add the hatch under that correct layer. And so we've got all four slope categories resolved for the first two contour lines. And then you'll move on to the next one and apply the same steps. So the next thing will be to deal with that next contour line, and then just do an offset, allocate that offset to a guide. If ever any of these boundaries are in the way, you can always just select them, select all of them, and then right click and say send to back, or alternatively you can just select all your contour lines, say select similar, right click and say bring to front, draw order, bring to front, and then your contour line will come back to the top. You create an offset, working with the four different categories, so from 800, 2000 millimeters to 4000, and then any area above that falls under the flatter than 1 in 20 category. So ultimately your final product will look like this example provided, and then you will then set up your title block, create your legend, and then the legend should then start to indicate obviously the slope gradients, and then you can, in brackets, you can just specify the horizontal distances. Okay, so next we'll look at how to insert or delineate your valleys and your ridges. So you go back to model. I'm just going to create one example of a ridge and one example of a valley, the obvious ones. The rest you'll have to just create yourself. So you go to the correct layer, start with the ridge, type polyline or select polyline, and then you know your elevation, so your lowest elevation being at the bottom. So ideally you want to start at the top, so your topmost contour, your topmost contour of your valley. So you, as you know, how you identify your valleys and your ridges, you always look at your V kind of shapes on your contour, and then you kind of join those lines at a horizontal angle. That will give you a first valley. As you will see on my example, the lines are rather thick. And how you do that, rather than using your line weights, you can use what is called a global width. So you select the particular line that you've drawn. You can draw all of them all at once first, and then afterwards select all of them, right click and say select similar, and then right click, go to properties, and then you will see under the geometry heading, there is an item there that says global width. So there you can just type, where it says varies there, you can just type, because I've got other lines on this particular drawing. So you just select all your lines, go to your geometry, and then go to the global width and just set that to 200. 300, I think. The other thing is that when you do your layers, just make sure that your ridges and your valleys have a dashed line type. So allocate the dashed line type for your ridges and valleys, and then the scale, the line type scale in your properties under general can be set to about 2.5 or 25, either one of the two, so 25 or 2.5. That scale will vary from model space to your layout. So you'll need to just double check on your layout which one works. I think uh, the one that I've got in my layout now, the line type scale is actually 2,5. So that is more legible on your layout and not so much on your model space. So just uh, if you can't see it on your model space, it's not an issue. Just double check that it does appear on your layout, because that means when you print it, it will show that the dashed line property. All right, and yeah, this will basically cover assignment 2, and you will need to then just submit both the PDF and the AutoCAD file to uh, Blackboard. Cheers.